Hi, this is James Cowie and welcome to my podcast on Hadrian's Wall, the Romans. Join me on a journey into the history of the wall, its fortifications, and how this amazing World Heritage Site holds so much information on the Romans and their lives. Please like, subscribe, leave a review, and join my Patreon for exclusive behind-the-scenes information and merchandise. The Empire needs you. Life under the Romans, what was it like? It's fair to say that it severely disrupted the way of living for the local people. The populace and farmsteads were abandoned in the 20 years or so following the building of the wall. The exact reason for the locals abandoning their lands is unknown, but we can surmise the following. Did the Romans have a designated military zone north of the frontier? Or did they move people from the coastal plain to south of the wall? Or finally, did they disrupt economic and social networks so much farmsteads were isolated and no longer able to function? Hadrian ruled for 21 years from AD 117. One of his first acts was to set clear borders to the empire and strengthen them. He did this in three main areas: Germany, North Africa and Britain. Hadrian travelled and visited most parts of his empire. Hadrian enjoyed culture, especially the Greeks, and architecture. He was responsible for building the Pantheon and his own mausoleum in Rome. For me, his greatest achievement was Hadrian's Wall. He also built a bridge across the Tyne which bore his name, Pons Aelius. The first fort on Hadrian's Wall is Segedunum in current-day Wallsend. The wall originally started at Hadrian's Bridge, and the section of the wall between Newcastle and Wallsend is an extension, built without a vallum, to the rear. The word Segedunum is made up of two British words meaning strong place or victory fort, and is only known because of the name being referenced in the Notitia Dignitatum. Why are the Romans using British words to name newly built forts in conquered territory? The answer to that is unclear, but I like to think that the Romans wanted to make integration of the population nice and easy. Not only did they let the locals keep their gods and beliefs, but they also let them keep their language. Interestingly, the name Wallsend dates from at least 1085. This was from a time when people could still see the wall leading down to the river. The site was of strategic importance and was mainly placed here right on the bend of the river to give clear views in both directions. The Bill Reach extending 2 miles to the south and the Long Reach stretching 4 miles east to South Shields. It's possible between here and Arbia that there were small fortlets housing small groups of soldiers. Segedunum guarded the north side of the Tyne and Arbia the south. At the original starting point of the wall in Newcastle, there was an impressive bridge over the river. With the wall being extended to Segedunum, it also needed something impressive to mark the new end of the wall. It is likely to have been built at the end of the branch wall, which ran down the hill from the southeast corner of the fort and projected deep into the water. The pier was possibly of an arched construction and could have had a temple at the end of it. There has been fragments of inscriptions reused as building stone in Jarrow that could have come from this very temple. It's possible that it recorded parts of a speech made by Emperor Hadrian to the troops in the area. With the Romans came a new way of building. Natively, we preferred our houses to be round, but the Romans preferred rectangular buildings. A variety of materials were used by the Romans, from stone, timber and tile to local resources like clay and lime. The Romans were proud of what they built, They would place inscriptions on stones to show this. The 4 main gates of Segedunum would have had inscriptions built into the wall that would have read, "The work of the Emperor Caesar Trajan Hadrian Augustus, father of his country 6th Legion Victrix, built this." On delving into Segedunum, one discovered that this Roman fort has re-emerged from oblivion. Covered with terraced houses from the end of the 19th century, the site was still threatened with destruction until Charles Daniels began his rescue excavations of 1975 to 1984. In 1997, Tyne & Weir carried out further excavations. In spite of its unlikely urban setting and relatively poor preservation, Segedunum produced the most complete plan of the original design of a fort wall. It is the only auxiliary fort in the Empire where a visitor can today enjoy an overall view of the fort layout. With the above excavations, we also have Buddle Street and the newly found Roman baths outside the fort. This will be a multiple episode production that will swing back to have a further in-depth look at Arbia Roman Fort. I will focus on Segedunum Roman Fort, Buddle Street excavations and the Roman baths situated outside the fort, once occupied by the ship inn. Fascinatingly, Buddle Street cuts straight through the Roman fort today. Let us now look exclusively on the re-excavations carried out within the Roman fort of Wallsend in the years 1997 and 1998. We will look at the excavations carried out by Charles Daniels in 1975 to 1984 as a separate episode. I also want to compare the two excavations and see how archaeology has progressed. This is in no way to highlight how new techniques can disprove previously accepted findings and beliefs. In 1929, the North of England Excavations Committee investigated the line of Hadrian's Wall and its junction with the west gate of Segedunum. They were able to establish a plan of the fort wall and inner ditch by trenching and locate a part of the Principia. In 1975 to 1984, Charles Daniels was able to reveal the fort interior for the first time. Equally, everything I present to you today may in years' time be interpreted or evidenced differently as archaeology once again advances. The area of the fort was covered with houses from the 1890s belonging to the working class. Once these were cleared, Charles Daniels was able to excavate for 9 years. When work began, there was a looming threat of further building development. The 9 years yielded influence in discussions of the development of the northern frontier, in studies of the internal arrangements of Roman military sites, and of views of the changes in the characters of forts and their garrisons in the later Roman period. You may ask why a re-excavation took place, especially after 9 years of digging by Charles Daniels. This is because we know that Daniels approached his excavation with a very narrow methodology, inherited by his teacher, Sir Ian Richmond. Daniels saw the importance of attempting to recover the first complete plan of a wall fort in its Hadrianic arrangement. Daniels was unfortunately forced, due to time, resources and funding restraints, to reconstruct the detail of the earliest periods, especially in the barracks, from small trenches and without removing the walls of the later periods. This meant that Daniels was only partly successful. The techniques used in that time period also missed timber buildings preceding the stone ones. Much of the earlier stratigraphy of the fort was thus not contacted during the 1975 to 84 excavations. Again, I would like to reiterate that this podcast is in no way criticising Charles Daniels. who at the time was working with meagre resources and difficult times. The excavation of 1997 to 98 offer interpretations that differ greatly from this offered by Charles Daniels. We shall compare the two excavations at a later date. Segedunum as we know it today opened in the year 2000. It includes a new museum, observation tower and study centre. A reconstructed baths, sadly closed due to roof and damp damage, and the entire layout of the fort. At the Buddle Street site just across the road, you can see a part of Hadrian's wall and a reconstructed modern length of the wall. To help you envisage the great sacrifice and costs it has taken to get Segedunum to where it is today, the 97 to 98 work costs an order of £320,000. This does not include the consolidation and display of the site, which cost £260,000, nor the £150,000 for the post-excavation work in the form of staff time. To this day, there are still many years of excavation to be done at Segedunum. Let us now delve into what we know about this amazing Roman fort. The fort remained a constant size, measuring approximately 138 metres by 120 metres, covering 4.10 acres. We also know that excavations carried out on the east gate and on the Principia forehall confirm Hadrian's wall would not go any further east than the west gate of the fort. This truly is Wall's End. The land was taken up by cord rig cultivation before the wall was extended here and the fort was built, although we are not certain how active when the Romans arrived. Interestingly, we know that the primary barracks at Segedunum were for cavalrymen and their mounts together. We also see evidence of this at Chester's Roman fort. Each barrack held a single terma, which was 30 cavalrymen. The hospital within the fort was of a very high quality and was made of stone. It was served by the aqueduct coming from the north under Hadrian's wall, and the latrine drain discharged into a new substantial stone sewer in the intervallum space running south. It is possible that this joined a major drainage gully on leaving the fort, which is one of the earliest defined elements of the excavated portions of the vicus. The hospital was later reduced in size around late 2nd or early 3rd century, and we know this was done to facilitate the movement of wagons between the minor west gate and northern part of the fort, probably the northern entrance to the granaries. It appears the northern gate of the fort was the most used for traffic along the military way and enabled the supply of goods to flow from South Shields to the rest of the wall. The forehall previously mentioned served as a covered administrative range, a single point to control the arrival and issue of supplies. In the period of 225 to 235, the hospital was demolished in favour of more barracks. This to me appears Segedunum was not a fort that saw much action in its years, and the requirements of a hospital was not needed. With more barracks being added, Segedunum could have served a role of a distribution point of manpower. A counter-argument to this is that more barracks may have hinted that the role of the fort garrison was not that of a sleepy frontier militia, and taking into consideration the defences west of the fort, indicate that there were military threats to this part of Hadrian's wall in the 3rd century. In the mid-3rd century, the fort of Segedunum reaches its zenith, with the vicus being its most populated and the slopes to the south and west being densely populated with buildings. The defences stretched along the river shore to the west. A road was also found running southwest, perhaps towards the baths, something we will cover in a later episode. Something that perplexes me to this day is how the western gate is north of the wall, the southern gate was possibly blocked up, and Military Way, the main supply road, was south of the wall. It is believed that Segedunum had a key that linked with the road from the Vicus to the southwest. How, therefore, did the fort receive its supplies from the key? Evidence pointing to the minor west gate being used solely to receive and dispatch supplies. This is backed up by the previously mentioned hospital being demolished to allow the movement of more wagons. The minor west gate gave access onto Military Way. We also have evidence in the late 3rd century or early 4th that the minor west gate road was relaid, which could have coincided with a reconstruction of that gate. Wagons would have looped around the granaries, down to the forehall and then back out again. Segedunum Vicus, according to pottery evidence, appears to have been abandoned around the 270s. The minor west gate has unearthed many coins, suggesting traders selling their wares at the fort gate. Although I have been calling it a minor gate, it was a principal point of entry to the fort. The Porta Quintana showed a pattern of coin loss, suggesting that traders were not allowed beyond the gate. In the late 3rd century or early 4th, the Vicus is abandoned. This, along with the hospital becoming smaller and then non-existent, implies that by the end of the 3rd century, Hadrian's Wall was no longer in its heyday, and the Vicus dispersed or moved on as the custom was no longer there. From 380 onwards, we find no coin evidence, and this again reinforces that Wall's End, Segedunum, was a shrinking fort, with no Vicus and very little activity. Then, in 410 AD, all Romans were recalled to Rome to defend it. I believe it is fair to say not all Romans answered this call and dispersed with their families into the local population. This has been an Inspirational Courses production with your host James Cowie. We hope you enjoyed it and look forward to seeing you on the next episode, Segedunum Part 2. Please like, subscribe, leave a review and join my Patreon for exclusive behind the scenes information and merchandise.
The Empire needs you.